As we're waiting for folks to join us, I'm going to start a few housekeeping and intro items. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So my name is Emily Womack with Dyson and Womack. We are partners with LA County Arts and Culture on delivering elements of the PAiD program, including this workshop series. And as always, we want to welcome everyone here tonight and thank you for taking time out of your Monday evening to join us and learn more about the field of public art, hear from folks from many different backgrounds and experiences, and dive into certain topics as we move through this series. As always, the sessions are being recorded and eventually will be hosted on the LA County PAiD's website. Right now, you can go ahead and look at all of the recordings from the first season of workshops that we've done. I believe there are 16 up on the website that cover a wide range of topics if you want to go through the back catalog in your own time. And then after we finish the cycle 2, we'll be getting the cycle 2 workshops up for folks. I'm going to jump down to the bottom of this agenda and just really highlight, we are going to use the Q&A function in the Zoom platform for our questions tonight. So if you look either at the bottom or the top, depending on how your Zoom is laid out, where you see like chat, hand raise, all of those fun things, there should be one that says Q&A, and it's a little call out box with a question mark symbol. Go ahead and open that up. This is where we'd love you guys to put your questions. You do not need to wait to the end of presentations. Go ahead and start putting in your questions as they pop up. We'll be reviewing them as we go through. We may pull in some questions during the presentation if they're really relevant, or we might just go through them all at the end, but don't feel like you have to wait. When you have a question, go ahead and put it into that Q&A, and then that'll also help us to kind of judge how much time we need to hold for questions near the end as well. There is the chat function as well, which, if you have a comment or you just want to be like, thumbs up, go for it. But with questions, please use the Q&A. It allows us to record our answers and make sure we're working through all of your questions. So I think we can go to the next slide, Summer. Oh, sorry. Let me back up real quick. I thought we had a different slide before this one. We are joined tonight by my colleague Summer Jade Levitt and my colleague Brianna McGillivray from LA County Arts and Culture, and Brianna is going to be sharing the land acknowledgement tonight.
Thank you. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tatatium, Sereno, Quiche, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandeño Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva Indians and California Tribal Council, the Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrieleño Band of Mission Indians Quiche Nation, the Yuhaviatum of San Manuel Nation, the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians, Coastal Band of Chumash Nation, Gabrielino Tongva Nation, Gabrielino Tongva Tribe. And you can learn more about the First Peoples of Los Angeles County by visiting our website and the LANAIC .lacounty.gov website. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. And Brianna will be coming back to join us at the end during the more complete Q&A to just field any questions that may be specific towards LA County Arts and Culture. But for now, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the end. And then I'm also going to pass over the baton to my colleague Summer to just go through top level the different elements of the PAiD program. I know many of you are coming to these and hearing this a lot, but we do want to make sure that folks are aware of the program and all of its different elements. So, Summer?
Yes. So the PAiD program is a multi-year initiative funded by the Mellon Foundation that aims to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in the field of public art. The program is designed to tackle critical barriers in the entry field, or in entry to the field of public art and address the wider career challenges that artists face. And so the program is made up by multiple components. The first is the PAiD Artist Council, and that is held across 2 cycles. It is 2 cohorts of 8 artists that are selected to engage in policy discussions to make recommendations to the county about opportunities for artists in LA County. And they are also selected to create temporary public artworks that will be displayed across LA County this coming spring. The PAiD apprenticeship is also held across 2 cycles. It is 2 cohorts of 5 artists, and these are artists who have never completed civic art projects or public artworks, and they engage in mentorship and training to complete their first public art commission. Then we have the PAiD professional development workshops like the one that you are at. It is also held across 2 cycles. We are in the second series of workshops, and these are workshops that are aimed to provide skills and resources to artists who are in all stages of their careers and from all backgrounds. And on the PAiD website, you will find recordings of these professional development workshops. You can find all of the sessions from the previous cycle on there presently, and you can find the recordings from this cycle in the coming months. On the website, you can also find more information about the PAiD program. And I will just also share a little bit about the upcoming workshops. We have one coming this Wednesday on February 4th that will be hosted by Emily Womack and Pat Gomez from LA County, talking about working with public agencies. Then in a few weeks, we will have a session on February 23rd on financial management for public art projects, where Hannah Cole and Lita Venieri will discuss budget management, insurance, taxes, and all of the things like that for public art projects. And then we will take a brief hiatus for about 3 to 4 weeks, and we will come back in March with some sessions that are focused on fabrication. And so the dates for those will be announced soon. And I will pass it back over to you, Emily.
Thanks so much, Summer. So I am also joined here tonight by Sarah Rara. And hi, Sarah. Sarah is here to talk about our topic tonight, which is titled From Idea to Implementation, Crafting Compelling Public Art Proposals. But Sarah is really going to speak a lot about their own experience and lessons learned and approaches taken and just a really incredible wealth of knowledge around navigating, responding to RFQs, RFPs, developing proposals from an artist perspective and all the challenges that that involves, the bandwidth that that involves, and the things that allow one to feel really committed and proud and excited about the work that you're putting out there. Because ultimately, as artists, that is what we want to see, is work that folks are passionate about, care about, feel connected to. And so I just want to thank you, Sarah, for joining us tonight. I couldn't think of somebody that I was more excited to invite to talk about this topic, not just because of your background, but also because of the energy and the care and the commitment and the spirit of generosity and education that you bring. So thank you so much. And if we want to go to the next slide, I'll do a very brief introduction about you and give a little bit of your background so folks have an idea. So Sarah, as I mentioned, is a multidisciplinary artist. Their work has included video, sound, performance, writing, exploring the position of witness within fragile systems and socio-political and personal dimensions of sensing technologies. Their work considers gender, queerness, technology, disability, and illness in connection with environmental research. They're a primary organizer of the ongoing project Lucky Dragons. That is actually how I first met Sarah, many years ago at this point. Their work, solo and in collaboration, has been presented across the United States in major institutions, including the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Hammer Museum, Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, and internationally at places like the Pompidou Center and London's Institute for Contemporary Art. Rara is also an assistant professor of moving image at Williams College. And I guess I should have clarified. It's been a minute since we've spoken. I wasn't 100% sure. Do you go by Sarah or Rara?
Well, first name Sarah, but my close
Great.
friends do call me
Call me Ra.
Rara. And my students, I'm Professor Rara to my students.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Well, Sarah, I am gonna hand it over to you now, but we'll be here and chatting throughout if need be. But thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to be here, and I want to see what comes out of this program. It's so inspiring. So I can't wait to see the public art that you all imagine and manifest in our city, in our county. So thank you for having me. And my goal is to be helpful. Like that is my true goal because I want to help you all shape public art and like give your gifts to our incredible city. And I think the keyword in the original title for the talk was compelling proposal. And I was thinking about it and I was like, at this moment, I feel such tenderness towards Los Angeles. Just the city has been through so much in the past year that I was thinking what I really want to see in public space are demonstrations of that tenderness and care and all the mutual aid that we've seen. So I'm thinking about tender and visionary proposals because I think ultimately public art is an act of service. It's a way of demonstrating strong connection to a place. And in the case of some artworks, that extends beyond the lifespan of the individual artist. It's like this gift to the future, potentially. And it's imagining what our city is and shaping that. Next slide, please. So a brief overview so you can kind of orient yourselves within the talk and where I'm going, so you have a sense of our trajectory. I'll speak briefly about a few public art projects that I've done that have been realized. I'm going to talk about the difference between an RFP and an RFQ and a cautionary tale of RFPs to offer you to protect your time, your energy, like that sort of thing. And then I want to talk about for those who haven't maybe applied to an RFP or an RFQ before, what are some of the main components of a proposal and some lessons learned about each of those components that I hope will be helpful. And then I have some maybe homework, some ideas about writing meditations, image research, how to write an artist statement that we're not going to do tonight. If this were like a semester-long course, these would be assignments, but these are assignments I give myself in preparing for a proposal to sort of like check my own work, see if I'm really connecting to each aspect of the project, and also to connect back to artists that I look to for inspiration. So that's the overview. If we could go to the next slide. This was my introduction to public art making, and it was such a special project, Dele. It's a large sculpture built into the Embarcadero in San Francisco. So it's this round cutout in the Embarcadero where below is water. So it's a marine environment. So there's a lot of engineering that went into this piece, but it's a sound installation. So built into the rail system are a series of microphones that make field recordings. And so they record, and then we play back under the surface of the Embarcadero 12 hours later. So in the night, you hear the lively sounds of day mixing with the environmental sound of the Embarcadero. You like hear voices, you hear children, you hear traffic, you hear this liveliness of 12 hours ago. And then during the day, sound is sort of elusive. You hear nocturnal sounds played back during the day. So very simple concept, extreme level of engineering to do this because of the marine environment. But that was my entrance into like a major commission, and it was at the Exploratorium San Francisco, and it had a set 3-year lifespan because we thought that's the length of time the electronics could survive in the marine environment. Could we go to the next slide? And agreements. This is a commission in 2017 from Ballroom Marfa. Incredible landscape, just incredible relationship to the sky and astronomy, and these like wide open stretches. The landscape there is so incredible. And also this proximity to the US-Mexico border. So this sense of those boundaries that are always felt, even when they're not visible. So we made a radio piece. So the piece involved 6 transmitters that are all on the same frequency that were distributed throughout the desert, with 2 sited at Ballroom Marfa, which is like a Kunsthal art space in the center of town. And the idea is that if you have multiple transmitters on the same frequency, but they each play back a different sound, then the listener mixes those sounds based on their proximity to different towers. So as you drive through these stretches of desert, you create your own sound composition based on your proximity to all of these invisible thresholds. So that was a sound piece that's really individual to each listener. Pretty lightweight infrastructure, but I'll say it's probably one of the biggest public art pieces ever because it's stretched for hundreds of miles. Like the sense of scale is actually like a magic trick. Like with very like little physical infrastructure, the piece itself is like this like spherical kind of dome of sound, of signal that stretches hundreds of miles. Next slide, please. Delta, this is from the current LA Public Art Biennial, Lucky Dragons, which is a collaboration between myself and Luke Fishbeck. We work often in performance and sound. We were commissioned to do 2 different performance pieces at 2 different sites. So this piece, Delta, was sited at Bee Canyon Park in Granada Hills, and the character of Delta is embodied by a different performer each day. So every single day, this performance is taking place in public space. There's a set of scores, and Delta is the embodiment of change. This site of Bee Canyon Park is right next to the aqueduct, but also one of the biggest water processing centers in LA. So we're thinking about all the changing states of water and Los Angeles's relationship to water through this character, Delta. Next slide, please. And then this is Ultra Infrared Shimmer. You know, the order's kind of funny here, but there's another current LA piece somewhere in this deck. Ultra Infrared Shimmer, I was so honored to do this video commission for the California Natural Resources Agency, their new building in Sacramento. it's for an audience of people working on climate justice issues. So like this is like the perfect, most like beautiful audience for a video piece. So I built this camera to produce the work that would be able to sense and record wavelengths of light that are not visible to the human eye, but are visible to insects and pollinators. So it shows some of that shimmering information that guides pollinators to the flower. Next slide, please. And this is the other current LA performance piece, The Spreading Ground. And this one was so special. It took place at Hansen Dam, which if you haven't been to Hansen Dam, I really recommend walking along this site. It's just an incredible piece of Los Angeles's water infrastructure. So the performance, we had open rehearsals, which meant we rehearsed on the trail regularly so that the public sort of became familiar with us and with the performance over weeks and weeks and weeks until the series of final performances, The Spreading Ground, which was basically an opera in motion along this several-mile stretch of trails at the top of the dam. So it involved voice, it involved playing copper water pipes. It's an ensemble piece at quite large scale. So this was really exciting for us to do, to think about public art through the lens of performance and time-based media, which is a recurrent theme for me, because I think whatever form public art takes, it is time-based. Even sculptures are subject to time. So I really like putting that forward by really putting to the front performance, video, and sound works in public space. Next slide, please. Reverse Women, this was a video commission from the city of West Hollywood to take over a Netflix billboard on Sunset Boulevard, to make kind of like feminist public art in the middle of advertising space. It's a video of images of women running in slow motion backwards in time. So all of the footage is reversed. So you have this sense of like the strength of these characters always in motion, but also a sense of flight and exhaustion, like the ground is being pulled under them. And the images themselves are based on advertising images from pharmaceutical advertisements. So there's also this valence of illness, disability, access to healthcare, how we envision wellness, what that looks like, and who has access to healthcare. Okay, so next slide is Orcus, and it's actually a piece in development. This is kind of the first version, and it's an example of large-scale architectural projection in downtown LA, which is something I love to do, to turn a building into a surface for image and sound is always very exciting to me. So Orcus is about orchids as these gender bending, queer encoded forms, and sort of like looking at all the different um, ways of interpreting that, both in terms of cultural symbols, the natural history of orchids and how they've been written about, and also the orchid as simultaneously a symbol of military power and wealth, mixed with this unruly queerness of the flower. It's just this like really interesting thing to untangle. So that piece is still in development, but this was one iteration of it. Okay, next slide. Okay, so how do all these things happen? How does this seed get planted? It's often through this process, which is very formalized within public art, of an RFQ or an RFP. And this is often what you face for your first commission, because only after having done maybe a few major exhibitions or other public artworks, you may at some point in your career be invited to propose something. But when you're first getting started, it's kind of like a cold call, and you're going to put out into the ether something beautiful and hope that the call is returned. So an RFQ is a request for qualifications. When you submit to an RFQ, you're sort of just putting your name in a hat. It's like a business card or a calling card. You're saying, this is who I am, this is what I've done so far, and this is why I'm interested in this commission, in this site, at this moment in my career. So you do have to make a statement, the sort of why do you want this? But you also just show your portfolio. And they're going to look at your work, not specific to this commission, and think, oh, is this a person we're interested in working with? So this is more like a, hi, I'm over here, I'm interested, just letting you know. And then an RFP is a little bit deeper. It requires more of you. It's more labor and time. So a request for proposals is an open call that says, here's the site, here's some information about the site, the budget, some parameters. They give you information to work with. And then you submit kind of an entire idea for that site. So it requires, some overlap with the RFQ, a resume, a portfolio of past work, a letter of interest, an artist statement. But then here's where the work really begins, is a project description specific to that site. So basically you're making a proposal already. And then sometimes it also asks for design or sketches of that idea, which if accepted, you will have space generally to modify those sketches and the design. It's just a starting point. But they do sometimes ask for proof of concept, like they want to see it in the site and imagine it. And then you might also be asked to submit the budget, like a sense of materials and fabrication, your timeline, and also references. So, do I recommend doing RFPs? Yes, sometimes, but be careful. So next slide. When would you do an RFP? It's a lot of work. So I want to tell artists, like, be really careful, protect your time. These are very labor intensive, but I would do an RFP when the site speaks to me. Like when I'm like, this is a dream. Like this is my life's work. If I could contribute to this site, to this community that I love, I would only do it if I already have a really deep connection to the project, or maybe I have excitement about the team, the other stakeholders that are working on it, or the fabrication team would be like exciting to work with. There has to be something that feels really generative for you to think about it and put that time and effort in. An RFQs are great. I think once you submit to one, you've done the work to potentially spread to many others. You can reuse and recycle a lot of that. So I would say be really cautious about RFPs. Apply only when they feel really important to you and really life-changing, or really important to your community. That your work exists in that space. So yeah, that's what I would say about the difference. I only apply if it's free. Like I don't want to pay to apply to things because it's so much work, and honestly, you just you don't know which are going to happen and which aren't. So those are kind of my cautionary tales around RFPs, but if it speaks to you, I say go for it. Like do a proposal. Why not? But make sure that you're really protecting your time and your energy for other areas of your work and your practice. Okay, next slide. All right, failure. So when I first got started doing this, I did feel a sense of disappointment. I was like, I'm ready. Like, I want to make art in public space. I want to make art that's for everyone, that's for my city. Doing these calls and just seeing like, who is reading these? Like, what is preventing this? And then I spoke to an artist I really look up to from an older generation, and I asked their experience, and they said, and they're very established in their career, and they were like, I do maybe like less than 1% of the things I propose. So they were saying for me, the proposal process itself has to give me something. Like these are ideas that I'm excited to manifest and share, whether or not they're realized. So I want to think about what can you get from a proposal, even if it's not the chosen one. And I think there are ways of using this process to generate other artworks or other kinds of research that you're doing in the studio. So next slide. Oh yeah, and that's an image of a proposal I made that was not accepted, but I'm really glad I did because it was so generative and the research just fed my work in other ways. So there is like this graveyard of like unrealized ideas, but I think these are also important. The ones that like didn't come into physical form, they take on other lives in other ways. So what is the use of these proposals, even if they fail? One is that you generate amazing drawings and collages and texts that can stand alone and potentially be exhibited or become part of publications and performances. There's a huge tradition of this. And I'll show a few images from artists I love where the drawings really become artworks that are exhibited. So think about how you might generate artworks through this process, whether or not the like monumental thing is ever realized. So it's an opportunity to continue research that feeds your practice in other ways. And sometimes a specific site or location is something that like really clicks research together. It's opportunity to meet new collaborators. You certainly make friends along the way of doing these proposals. Opportunity to research new materials and fabrication methods that maybe weren't part of your studio practice before, but in doing a proposal, you start thinking about, oh, I do want to work in metal. I do want to work in glass. And I think that's a really valuable part of this. Another part is that in the research you do about the specific site and setting, you deepen your community ties because you need to get out there and spend time in the space, see how it operates, talk to your neighbors, talk to everyone. So you're kind of deepening your ties to the city in many ways. And I think that is something that's like difficult to measure, but really important in the career of an artist. And then also, I think the failure component, it always reinvigorates my love of DIY and artist run initiatives and spaces. The fact that like you can make public art with or without a commission. Like you can make your work in the public spaces in your community. So I start looking at examples of artists who have done that. And I think that's really reinvigorating to me also. Like that like moment where I'm like, hey, wait, I love Elysian Park. I can make a performance for Elysian Park on my own, like ideas like that. So I think there are more like rogue ways of working that can be really interesting that come out of this process. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so a proposal. Maybe you submitted to an RFQ and you were added to the shortlist, and now they say it's time for the proposal. So if you go through the RFQ process, there's often a budget to develop the proposal, and that is the ideal situation. Like that is the best outcome of an RFQ. And the budgets usually are not huge. It's maybe like $1,000 to $3,000 to develop the proposal and concept, but I find that really great as an artist. I've used those budgets to hire people where I've like learned things from them. Like I learned 3D modeling from working on one project and hiring someone who's really expert in 3D modeling. And then I learned how to do it myself. Like there's just things you can gain from this if you get through the RFQ stage to a shortlist to making the proposal. So when you propose a public art commission, there's a few really important like chunks of that proposal. So I'll just go through some notes on each of those chunks in the hopes that it'll help you refine your proposal. So one is the project description. The next is the artist statement. And then the last are the design and sketches. I think, there are other components sort of custom to that site and its concerns, but these three are sort of in every proposal that I've ever done. So I'm going to focus on these three. Next slide, please. So the project description, that's your concept and your purpose. So it's not your artist statement. It's a focused account of what this very project includes, and being specific is really helpful in this section. And you do want to cover all of the multifaceted dimensions of this project because questions will be raised. And if you can kind of cut to the chase and answer some of those questions before they're even asked at panel, it just shows you're thinking about like all the potential pitfalls, like how it changes over time, like you're thinking about everything. So in the project description, you want to cover the site and the context that the work will appear in. You want to talk about the goals of this project and the kind of service, public service that it ideally achieves. You want to talk about materials and like the tactile and embodied part of it, and the fabrication and the maintenance. You definitely want to talk about the maintenance of your piece, and I'll get into that. And then this is also where that sense of visionary potential lives. It's like this transforms our city. It's that sense of future and imagining. That wow factor also lives in this section. Next slide. Yes. Yeah, this is basically what I just said. I'm going to leave it in the deck though, because it's kind of like a bullet point. So if you go back to this could be like a checklist to you. Like, does it talk about the materials? Does it talk about public interest? Like, this is sort of my own way of boiling that down, that it has to mention each of these things in the project description. Okay, so next slide. And the goal is really to be clear and compelling. So a compelling, clear narrative connects your artistic vision with the site, with the community, and with the specific goals of the commissioning body. So this is an interesting thing because I think this is also kind of a trap artists can fall into, is sort of projecting what their audience wants. And I would say if you can kind of subdue that part of it, it will benefit you because this is still your work, and lead with that. And if you want a team that's going to support your work the way it is, you don't need to like play to a safer version or like a projected version of what the commissioning body wants necessarily, because you don't actually know. So I think focus on speaking to the site and the people who actually use that site. Think of that as your primary audience rather than projecting what these like 5 people want or envision, because you really can't know that. So stay true to your work and your connection to that place. So 2 things to check are, can you talk about the artwork in plain speech? Like if you go through your project description and there are a ton of keywords, that can become very vague. So I will make a case for keywords, that it is a way of like sort of pointing to an entire body of research quickly, and that can be very helpful and useful. But there's also another extreme of too many keywords where you're like, what is this really about? Like, and how is this personal? How is this embodied? And what is it? Like, you can kind of get lost in that. So I would say, how would you explain it just to someone you're sitting next to on a bus and you know nothing about them, and they might not know anything about art or contemporary art or art history? Try to state it in a way that really is open to anyone, because that's the goal of public art, is to sort of welcome everyone in the city at all of their various kinds of experience with art. And then my other note, so grammatical tense and this like subjunctive tense of I hope it would do this or it will do this. Like when you make it seem tentative, I would avoid any like grammar that makes it seem like you hope this will happen, maybe it won't. If it did, it should, it could, like that kind of thing. Instead, I would say, write about it like it's already confirmed, like it's happening. Write about what it's doing in the space. It's almost an act of writing fiction because I want you to take me into the world where it exists. So when you're writing, write about it vividly and like it's a certainty. And I think some people might think, oh, that's overconfident. It sounds like I'm assuming I'll get it. No, it just is it's world building. It's a way of actually imagining when it happens and preparing us for that. So I'd say don't shy away from writing about it like it's a sure thing and like it already exists. That's the kind of style guide I would recommend. I think it's helpful as a reader to really imagine it and instead of always being like, I hope it does this. I want to really feel the existence of the work even before it happens and feel almost like it's inevitable, like the space needs it. Okay, next slide. The
I just want to
site,
say, Sarah,
yeah.
I so agree with those points.
Oh, I'm so
Um,
glad you've read so many.
I have, and I've watched groups, selection panels read so many. And that
Yeah.
first thing you shared is so real. Like
Okay, good.
when
I'm
folks
glad.
think they know what the panel wants, I have never seen them like I just really, really want to say yes,
Okay,
yes.
good. You've seen behind the scenes more than I have. So this is good confirmation. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to be
Good.
talking about the behind the scenes on Wednesday a little bit more.
Good.
So if folks can come to that one too, I think it'll be a great counterbalance to this. But I just really, really
Amazing.
appreciate that insightfulness and those. I fully agree with all of those directives.
Okay, good. Okay, good. It means I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
This is good. The site and the context. This is so important. Like, I just want to underline, highlight that the sculpture, if it's a sculpture, the performance, the video, the sound piece, it doesn't exist without the environment in these cases. The environment completes the work. So you can't just talk about your contribution as if it exists in a vacuum. I think you want to imagine those interactions, and those interactions span time in unruly ways because it's not just the present moment. History vibrates in the present. And I think that's something that artworks can really beautifully highlight is the history of our city in all of its dimensions. Beautiful, painful, all of it. A space holds all of that memory. So I think that your artwork should really address the history of the site as well as the ongoing community use and the environment. So who inhabits the space? And I think it's really important to do some work, to spend as much time as possible researching and also, if you can, visiting the site and being there because it might surprise you. The actual experience of the place at different times of day is such powerful information. And also that the inhabitants of the site would include both human and non-human agents. We're living in a multi-species world, and I think it's really amazing how artworks can draw out those relationships as well. So really research the history of the site, spend as much time as you can there, and also consider how your artwork changes the site for better or worse. Like really what it's doing and how it's impacting human behavior at the site. So you want to consider also issues of access and how accessible is the site, and can your artwork make it more accessible? So this is not only physical access, but it might include aspects like language justice or just the spirit of welcoming that an artwork can provide. And then there's a sense of serving a public that already exists or pre-exists the artwork, but I also think that artworks draw people to them. So this is more dynamic than who's already there. And artwork can also cultivate publics and counter publics. So what is your artwork doing? It's going to create a change. And what is important for you to preserve and cherish and honor about the site? And then what are ways that your work could potentially create even greater access or community safety or like a sense of welcoming? Yeah, this is like a really deep and dynamic part of the process. And it's because I feel that art is so powerful. It's also something to be careful with that power. Like there's a real responsibility that comes with this, with like adding anything to a site. Next slide. So goals and service. So I think about this a lot because I think artists often have a reputation as tricksters, rule breakers, and I love all of that. But there can be this like assumed antagonism sometimes with a public artwork where it's assumed that artists want to go against engineering or like against fire code. But I actually like to, when I arrive, think about the sense of shared solidarity that I already have with all of the other stakeholders, because I know that artists, at least in my community of artists, are really invested in mutual aid and considerations of community safety and service and honoring labor and creating better access. Like these are things that artists fundamentally work toward. So I like to sort of set the tone that I want an exquisitely engineered artwork that can like be safe to be around. Like no artist wants an artwork to injure anyone. Like these are just like basic things that for some reason have to be reaffirmed, because I think sometimes there's this like unspoken tension that people think artists aren't about that. But I like to just, when I meet with a group, remind them like I'm in total solidarity with making sure the piece is well constructed, that it's well engineered, that it's beautifully fabricated and installed, and it's like really hardy and safe. Like that's what I'm into. So I think just before those tensions grow into something not good that holds the project back, I just remind everyone that like that is my goal too. And then we tend to work really well together because we have this understanding that we're all working toward access and like proper engineering. And I think this actually comes from because I come out of a punk community and like kind of DIY music spaces. Safety was always so important. Like we want fire code. We want people to be able to get in and out of buildings safely. Like we want all of those things, counter to what people might imagine. That's like a big part of organizing shows, is making sure everyone's okay. So see where you're in alignment with institutional frameworks. And I would even point that out to people because they may not assume that with you in the role as artists. And then also to locate where you push against expectations and precedent and existing systems of power, because you don't have to be in total alignment. You have shared solidarity, but you're also there to move public art forward in a way that improves it for artists in the future. So when I make a complaint, I don't actually make it for myself. I make it maybe for an artist coming after me, so that they will have considered this already by the time they arrive. So it's sort of a gesture towards the future to locate where you're not in solidarity and where you ethically do want to push a boundary. And that's for future artists working in public art to have more space and more support. So that's just something to think about is your service. And in each moment, who are you serving? And sort of what are the ethical frameworks around that? Because these are multi-stakeholder situations. Okay, next slide. Maintenance and labor. I definitely talked to Emily about this a little because one of the biggest hangups for a proposal is just fears and worries about how it will be maintained. So you want to include in your proposal how the work ages, how it evolves over time. What kinds of upkeep does it need in order to persist? And then also you have to start thinking, what is the cost of that labor and who is responsible for it? And is that actually sustainable for the lifespan of the piece? And then added to that, I would say people are always worried about, will this work be defaced? Can it be broken? How resilient is it actually? So consider maintenance. This is sort of an underemphasized part of a proposal because a proposal is often sort of dream forward, all the like dazzling information, but I think you have to think about the quieter aspects of the artwork as well, and also who maintains it. And you want to design an artwork where the balance of maintenance and labor feels correct. Like you don't want to neglect that part of it. Yeah, Emily, did you
I
want to
have a
jump in?
question for you, actually, because
Yeah.
I was thinking about this while you were talking about it. And I, again, fully agree with how you're framing this as like giving that confidence while also giving the inspiration. And I'm curious in your path when you've had a chance to maybe not all proposal stages offer an interview or sometimes it's reviewed and then you find out and maybe you ask for feedback and you get it and maybe you don't, but when you have had an interview process or questions come back to you about the proposal,
Mhm.
has there been have you found most of them, the questions come back around this area of like safety and maintenance, or equally so about the actual proposal, its concepts and thought? Like, have you seen more questions when you do get them about proposals come in relationship to a certain area that you're talking about or not?
I think it depends on the proposal for sure. Like
Yeah.
I didn't show a slide of this one, but we actually Lucky Dragons made this piece in Laguna Gloria Sculpture Park in Austin that was mirror polished steel. So
Mm.
then, the question is who's polishing?
Oh, yeah.
And I had that question too. I was like, I
Yeah.
really want to make this piece, but I do need a person who will polish this weekly. And so that was a question. And like, luckily, it was addressed early on. And at least the piece was designed so that the polishing was fast. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
flat planes of
Mm-hmm.
steel.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't anything with a lot of nooks and crannies,
Mm-hmm.
but it came up right away. And because we had sort of prepared for that question, or we came in being like, we want this kind of support, like
Yeah.
this is what we want,
Yeah.
um, then it could be met. And honestly, if they had said we don't have that capacity, then we would have redesigned the piece. Like we
Yeah.
would have completely built our concept to the level of maintenance that was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then so much of my other work strives to be lightweight and low impact that the maintenance is sort of more about the human to human
Mm.
interactions. Like I
Mm.
really like open rehearsals for performances because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be like an artwork landed like it was from an alien spaceship. It was like suddenly there. I want it to sort of like grow in
Yeah.
the space and for people to like normalize having art in their everyday life as opposed to this kind of like one-off encounter.
Yeah.
Like it becomes regular. So I think that's a form of maintenance too, is sort of like
Yeah.
cultivating inactivity in a space that is in artwork, but it can also blend with the activities that are already going on. So the question always comes up. I don't think there has ever been a time when someone in an interview hasn't said, I have this scenario in my mind where something bad happens.
Mhm.
What would you do?
Mhm.
So whether it's maintenance or just sort of conflict,
Mhm.
like I think you also need to imagine that.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of my suggested writing meditations,
Mm.
is to think about artworks in your community, in your neighborhood, that feel neglected,
Mhm.
that feel like they
Mhm.
don't have
Mhm.
the care they need.
Mhm.
And like, what are the lessons you can gain from those neglected artworks as you make a design to try to avoid that
Yeah.
kind of neglect kind of falling onto your work?
Yeah.
So it always comes up for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. Oh yeah, the writing meditation. So this is homework, and I think this would be helpful just to think about what exists in public art that we want to keep, that we treasure, and then what is missing? What do we need? Like, what does the city really need from public art right now? And what feels liberatory? Like, what feels radical and different? So, the first meditation, I would set a timer for just 15 minutes. I think timers are really helpful to just generate and to think of a public artwork that really shaped you and shaped your life, and describe your memory of encountering that work for the first time and what lessons does it hold for you. So this is like time travel, like go to a public artwork that really moved you and is important to you. And then the second one, set another timer, 15 minutes. Think of a public artwork that you really hate, that really irritates you, and you're just like, this thing sucks. And what are the qualities that feel off about it or wrong about it? Because I think there's so many lessons in there too about what you don't want to do. And that's really good information. And then third one, like I said, is just, where are you seeing neglect around a public artwork? And just imagine, why did that happen? Like, what's going on, and what are the kinds of care that that work needed, and what are the kinds of care that your work needs? So that's all of that, I think, will help you in sort of envisioning something for the future. So it's a little homework if you think it will be helpful. Next slide. And this is something I do quite often, not just like when I'm doing a specific project, but just sort of as like a check-in for myself, is to think about your artistic lineage, because you are part of the history of public art. Even if you're just beginning, if you're just getting started, you're part of a continuum of artists doing this. The artists who have done it before you, and the artists who will do this after you. So identify artworks in public space that are critical to your formation as an artist that you think about, and gather images of those works and consider, how did they shape your idea of what's important in public art, what is possible, what you cherish, and you sort of build this family tree. And sometimes it's nice to make this explicit in a proposal. You're like, I'm working from these lineages. And that can be really clarifying, actually, to know what artists another artist is really looking to as part of that continuum. So these are mine. Next slide. So really formative, and maybe I think you can see this in the works I presented. So this is what I mean, like really clarifying this can be powerful. But the Messages to the Public series in Times Square from the mid 80s to the early 90s. I saw these as a kid growing up in New Jersey and New York, and it rocked my world. I think I would not be an artist if not for seeing things like this in the city. So this is a Guerrilla Girls piece that it just haunts me. Like to this day, when I read those words, I understood immediately it was a takeover, that it was not advertising, that it was a message beamed to the public. And the political power of that is so immense. It felt radical to me and exciting. So next one. Yeah, these are real heroes. Graham Fury from ACT UP, seeing these works coming of age as a young queer person, like during the AIDS crisis. Yeah, seeing these pieces in public space, it made me think about what art can do, how really radical it is and life-saving it is, how it connects people, how it gestures towards the future and care, and how it pushes against existing systems of power that are harmful. So this is just like true inspiration. This piece was on buses going all around the city. It's so beautiful. I think about it all the time. So these are like the gold standard of public art in my mind. Next slide. And then the lineage of feminist land art is definitely in the mix for me. It's really important to me. I want to recommend this book actually. This is the catalog. Oh, it's blurry, from Groundswell, which is a recent survey show at the Nasher Sculpture Center. The images are so amazing. Like I'm sure, like go to the LA Public Library. I'm sure they have it, the Groundswell catalog. So feminist land art, artists like Nancy Holt, Agnes Denis, Anna Mendieta, Michelle Stewart, Beverly Pepper, Patricia Johansson, Lita Albuquerque, like the way they worked with land and public space, with the environment, constant inspiration. So I think just really drawing a lineage of queer and feminist public art practices has really nourished me as I make proposals. So I think it's important for each artist to sort of think about what preceded you. How did you get here? Next slide. Ana Mendieta's work, film, video, environmental works, true inspiration. And I think also this sense that a commission doesn't have to be material intensive or like insane budget or even sanctioned. Like it can be DIY. It can be in a place that's just of real importance to you, that feels charged. And the documentation, it lives on forever. So I think this is also a way of working that it's like as you develop RFPs and RFQs, looking at her work is just a reminder that the works can exist in so many forms and scales. Truly inspiring. I just constantly think about her and her performances and the films and the photographs as public art. Okay, so next slide. So these are really tiny details. I'm just gonna say, like, as you're reading through and checking your work, take a look at the graphic design and the layout, because I've been on a few jury panels and there's some proposals that just look really good. Like their CV has a really nice layout. And it's just this subtle thing where I'm like, they know what they're doing. Like it's just this like little polish on the graphic design. I'm not saying I'm there, I'm not a graphic designer, but like pay attention to the visual aspect of the proposal itself, the typesetting, the layout, just give it a once over, make sure it looks really clean and it reflects your aesthetic and the spirit of the work. Each of the sections should reinforce the other sections. So you don't want to like duplicate information between the artist statement and the project description, but they should kind of vibrate together. They need to reinforce each other. And then a balance between suggesting that the project is suitable and feasible, but also mind-blowing and wow. And it's that sort of balance of like, this is very practical, this could happen, and this is very radical and visionary, like learning to sort of like hold those different ends of the spectrum of like the energy of it is like another subtle detail. Next slide. So the piece has a lifespan, but the project itself also has a lifespan. So in the proposal, you start thinking about your time and sort of like when the deliverable is needed, and sort of thinking about what are each of those stages and what is happening and being activated in each of those stages. And you do need to articulate this in your proposal. Like what transforms between the research period, the fabrication period, the installation period, and the afterward, like after it's been installed. You have to think about each of those as a progression. Okay, next slide. Your artist statement, it's different than a project description. It's really about your practice broadly. So it's also about your career and the other work that you've made up to this point and what drives your work. So in the background there, I have Yvonne Rayner's No Manifesto. I don't think your artist statement needs to be a manifesto, but it should just really clearly reflect how you operate, what you're researching, what you're thinking about, what's important to you. Next slide. So here's like a little homework assignment. If you ever feel writer's block when you're writing an artist statement, sometimes I just feel low energy at this point. I'm like, I have been talking about myself for so many pages. It's so hard to do this. But this, I think, is helpful to sort of like break it down. So first, research. Look at the artist statements of artists whose work you really admire, kind of aspirational examples of a career in public art that you really look up to. Look at their artist statements, look at the kind of language and the style of them. And I would say gather 5 and just deeply analyze those statements and like the order they place things. And then part 2 is just to generate. So if you're feeling stuck, here are some kind of like basic and very common elements of an artist statement that you can start with. One is just your introduction, your name, where you live and work, and what media you work in. Like that's very important to include. The second part, your work and verbs. What verb are you using? Does your work engage? Does it examine? Does it explore? Does it investigate? Does it address? Start listing verbs that are useful to you in this artist statement, because you don't want to repeat, but you also want to really dial in like how your practice goes from research and idea into public, like into that public address mode. List the larger themes and questions and ideas that are important to understanding your work. There may be some keywords here, and then take a look back and say, does this feel vague? Like, have I really said it? Is it too general? Do I need to be more personal, more specific here? And then for the sensory qualities of your work, I think people often they forget this, but what does your work look like? What does it sound like? How is it made? Like that's actually one of the primary things we're always thinking about as artists. So I don't know why it doesn't make its way into statements, but I want to argue for it being there. So talk about the sensory aspects of your work and what's important to you there. So that you could use this as a primer and see where it takes you. Because I know writing an artist statement can sometimes feel overwhelming or just kind of trudging along. And I want it to feel more generative. Like you're like, oh, this verb, that is what I'm doing. Or, oh, this is like tactile quality is really important to me to describe. So I think hopefully this is helpful as homework to help you make that beautifully crafted artist statement that you're going to need. If you do RFQs, you're going to send out artist statement after artist statement. So you can recycle this work is like a good aspect of it. Okay, so next slide. Your design and sketches. This, as you get closer and closer, once you're in a short list and you're making the design and the sketches, this is probably one of the most important dimensions. Like even more than the writing, this is how we bring a piece into existence and also how you involve collaborators This is how you work with the fabricator. This is how you work with the architect. This is how you communicate things to end up being made. Next slide. So I think designs and sketches can often privilege the visual aspects of a work. But I want to advocate for your designs and sketches really pointing to the multi-sensory experience of the work. And I think a really good sketch can do that. So as you're making, even if you are making images, images communicate sound, images communicate touch and space and the humidity and the air and how optics work there, and even the smell, like just bring it to life and remember that we're not in an only visual world when we're talking about public art. I really want it to connect to all of the senses and also to be truly accessible. Every part of information about your piece should be translatable into some other signal. So image becomes description, description becomes image. Like it can flow back and forth. So I want you to also, when you're thinking of these sketches, don't necessarily think of them only from the visual standpoint, because we need to understand touch and space and sound and how that operates in that environment. Next slide. Here's some examples. Pulled these from the Groundswell catalog as well. Some of you may know this piece by Nancy Holt, Sun Tunnels. It's a monumental land art piece, very important. This is one of the sketches for Sun Tunnels. So it's both a technical drawing that can really guide the fabrication and the placement of the work, but it also is an artwork by itself that can circulate in gallery space, in publication. And I think it is only ever a benefit to do this, to make your designs and sketches also operate in other ways for other audiences. Okay, next slide. Ana Mendieta, this is the sketch on the left for the piece on the right. This is what I mean when I talk about tactility and humidity and weight. And all of those things are something to consider even in a visual representation. We get all of that in these drawings and the finished work. We have a sense of like the heaviness and the gravity, like the sun baking the earth, the way it might sound in a really sparse space. I think all of that is in here. And I think this drawing on the left, it may seem purely poetic, but it actually is a rendering that you can fabricate from. So I just think there's an interesting connection here between designs that are also artworks. Next slide. These are the drawings of artist and landscape architect Patricia Johansson. And one is for a garden that represents a brain. It's kind of like these like path of a brain. And the other one is a space for monarch butterflies. And I think there's just something about her diagrams that always feel so alive to me, that I always return to. And they are diagrams for landscape architecture. Like the piece would be fabricated in massive scale from these drawings because they form gardens that you can then walk through. They become total environments, multi-species environments. And all of the important information is here, but I also get a sense of the liveliness and tactility of that world that they're creating. So I always think about these drawings as well. And next slide. I mean, Agnes Denny's drawings, I just marvel at them. And they do become landscape architecture. They do become environments. And the drawings themselves, the diagrams, they really give you a sense of the scale she's thinking on and the ambition of her work. You feel the real power and scale from these drawings. and they're both literal and poetic. They kind of operate at all scales. So maybe I'm just advocating for drawing. And I think there is a parallel if you're working digitally. There is tactility and there is the sense for your 3D rendering to become an artwork that exists beyond the proposal. Maybe you make a video out of those 3D models. Maybe you use it to generate something that exists in other kinds of spaces. Yeah, so these are some inspirations. And I think that's all. Next slide. I just want to say thank you. And I hope this is helpful. I really do.
I have no doubt that it has been. It's been helpful even for me. So
Okay, good. I
I
want to
just
see these proposals come to life. So I'm like the greatest cheerleader of everyone out there.
absolutely. I just also wanted to say thank you for walking us through that really comprehensive and uh, I think sometimes when I think about like talking about proposals and stuff, and you start to get a little like, um, I feel the absolute opposite coming out of this last 45 minutes. I feel inspired and excited and ready to look at more proposals. So I just want to say thank you for bringing that reminder of what we're doing is truly about building creative work that is nourishing at every stage. Um, so I think with that, we are going to turn a little bit towards questions because we definitely have some questions from folks. And Summer, if you don't mind bringing Brianna back in from the audience. And while you do that, I wanted to ask a follow-up question to that last segment you were talking about, because with the sketches and things like that, because you showed everywhere from professional renderings to hand sketches. And one of the things we get asked a lot as commissioners is like, what level of visual do I need to put together, especially for folks who are, at different points in their career and have access to different things.
Mhm.
Um, and I was just wondering for you, when you look at something, how do you kind of decide what are the right type of visuals that you want to prepare for a proposal? Like, are there different things where you're like, I'm just really feeling great about the way photography or sketch or model or maquette, or I really know I need to go fully into rendering? I imagine maybe some of that is by dictate of the RFP, but I was curious if there were, if you had thoughts about maybe why you've made certain decisions to utilize certain forms of visuals in representing your work in the past in proposals.
Yeah, I think, in some RFPs I've done, they've actually given me a drawing and been
Mm,
like, put your artwork into this drawing. Like they want to have all of the proposals in a room in like the
mhm,
same rendering. And I always find that constraint really difficult because I think for me, the form of the diagram is an area where I have fun. Like that's fun for me. That's part of where it's a hack, but I like the idea that in my proposal, I do want to generate an artwork that then can live in the archives, that then can live in a museum collection. Like I have this is part of my motivation that it's not just for this group of 5 people, that
mhm,
it could also be a form of public address. Like the drawing could be a form of addressing space.
mm.
Um, so sometimes I feel those limitations are constraining. And then sometimes I add my own, and it's kind of like a counterpoint. It's like if I have to do this like already laid out rendering, I kind of also want to make an ink drawing. Like I want to do my own thing. And I also I think would have been on the other side of it. Maybe it's because I'm an artist. I don't know how it is for people in other roles, but I think sometimes the form that the artist chooses is really good information for me. And if the form of their diagram feels true to them and their work, it feels like an act of generosity for them to really lean into that direction because they're really communicating how they work and how they move from idea to concept to object. And when I see it reflected in the portfolio as well, it's like it shimmers. Like I feel like the commission belongs in the span of their career. It has more of a sense of belonging if they can do the diagram in a form that they work in. Um, it's tricky because I think 3D renderings, you can kind of tell when things in our physical world came from SketchUp. And sometimes you're like, that thing was a SketchUp model and now it's a cafe. And that's just very different than an architect who's like making a physical model too, to like learn things from that, or like doing studies of light. Like I just think there's like added information to the digital rendering that I really appreciate. So I think your proposal can be interdisciplinary by itself. It doesn't have to, like, if you use a digital rendering, it doesn't have to all be cohesively that. Like, I think you can mix media. And I think you should do what's exciting to you because it is labor. So if you don't actually enjoy making the diagram in that way, I kind of support any form of rebellion or pleasure in the process that you take for yourself. And I think that can often lead to a stronger proposal too. Like if there is a real sense of pleasure and commitment in the diagram making. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you touched on this a couple of times in your answer, so I'm just going to go to my next question first, and I promise we'll get to everyone else's questions. But I did want to, one of the things that you spoke about was that finding of alignment and finding of space to perhaps push back against certain things that don't sit right for you. In the field of public art, there's often an inherent power imbalance where you are a single artist and you are engaging with a much larger entity, a commissioning agency, a government, building project, with lots and lots of folks and lots of resources. And I think what has stood out to me and what you have advocated for throughout this talk is about agency and power in one's voice and kind of saying those things. So I was curious if you could reflect a little bit on your journey of building your confidence with that voice in that space and maybe any thoughts you might have around that for artists.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I have cultivated and that feel really blessed to be part of in Los Angeles is really peer-to-peer support. So, sometimes you're like looking to institutions for affirmation or resources to make things happen. And there's a real power imbalance there. So the reminder that I have peers and that we show up for each other, and like maybe some days I'm helping them make something in public space. Like I'm just assisting another artist in like a service capacity. And if I have an idea, just friendship is just like the best resource. And I think when you have that like clash of power or that sense of gatekeeping, to also have DIY frameworks for making work possible that cut through that feels really important, not only like for survival of an artist in your career, but also I feel like groups of artists come up together. Like when the affirmation happens, it's like peer groups that have been working together all along to help each other succeed. So number one is like really work with your friends, like work at all scales. And I think that gives me the confidence to push back. And I think something I frequently do is, maybe it occurred a little bit after I had done several RFQs or RFPs, and I just wasn't feeling like I was just feeling like there was a pattern in the short list, like the finalist groups, and I felt confident to point that out
Mm.
to the jury. So after like the rejection comes, that's fine. Like I've moved on. It was generative for me to think about. But if I notice, for example, there's not it that the selection isn't really the world I want to see in public art, I
Mhm.
feel confident pointing that out and sort of like calling them in to be like, did you notice that, thanks so much for the feedback. I appreciate it. This was a great process. But I also notice all the finalists are male artists. So I hope in the future, like I'm going to see a different list. So just sort of like calling people in when
Yeah.
you notice there's not the representation that you want to see
Mhm.
along gender, race, class, disability, all of it. And public art really is for the people. So I feel confident now. I think it's the tone. I think because I'm like, I have a way of saying things really directly, but it's because I'm having fun on my own. Like I have such pleasure from the work that I did. I'm like just pointing out, and there's just like, I just have to say it. So
Yeah.
I think it's also
Yeah.
fine to push back
Mhm.
because there is a sense of gatekeeping, maybe more than anywhere else, because it's this application process
Yeah.
that precedes. So it's like, really, there's like, a jury. And that
Mhm.
feels so strange. And it feels kind of counter to the way artists work elsewhere,
Mhm.
which are really constellations of real friendships and like real long-term relationships and conversations,
Yeah.
as opposed to sending something in and not really knowing how it was discussed and all that XYZ. So I say definitely push back if you're not seeing the public art in the world that you want to see, because as an artist, you also want to make it easier for like future artists.
Mhm.
And you want to see better public art like in your city, in this like city that we love.
Mhm.
um yes, I think feel free to point out anything wrong that you're capturing, and I think you'll only like hopefully gain the respect of everyone around you, because it's usually obvious. It's just the data. You're like, I'm looking at the data, this is not correct.
Yeah.
um So, and if you don't feel like you're in a position where you can say that, maybe someone you feel like they're in a better position to
Mhm.
say it, feel free
Mhm.
to ask your friend to say it. Like if you feel like they're more like protected in that space. So I would say push back 100%. Yeah, that you can shape the process for someone applying next. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Okay, let's dive into some of these questions from folks who have been hanging out and listening tonight. Um, I'm going to go back to the very beginning and just work our way through. So we had a question that was, what are your thoughts on unpaid work of creating a design budget and timeline? And I'm going to add to that versus options when you have it paid.
Yeah, I don't like it at all. I like artists to get paid. I want everyone to get paid at every stage of the process. So I'm really anti doing several unpaid proposals. And it's really, really rare that you should do an unpaid RFP.
Yeah.
It really has to be that there's this spiritual soul connection to that site where you're like, I am so compelled, I must do this. I am the one who should do this. It has to be so profound
Yeah.
to do unpaid labor. You have to get something else out of it. Like it has to be something else for you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, resources, we can think of it expansively. If that proposal gives you support in some other form rather than money, then that's something to consider. But really everyone should get paid for their proposal labor because it is so much work. So I would definitely avoid unpaid RFPs unless it's that like once in a lifetime thing that you must do. Yeah,
I agree. I also think to that end, it also said like you're also interviewing the commissioning agency at that point of like, do I want to work with you? Do we get along? Is this
that's
going
a
to
good
be a
point.
long
Yeah.
haul projects, a lot of them, you know? And so I think that's, you know, and I will say there are certainly some, definitely in some smaller communities, smaller organizations where they simply don't have the capacity for a paid proposal, and it might be coming more from that than from lack of awareness about what is standard. But if you're looking at a larger commissioning organization and they're not offering that, that might be something to kind of go, what is it going to be like working with this group down the road too? So definitely agree with you on that front. And as Brianna would say, the county pays for their proposals.
Yeah, yeah. I want to just say wonderful presentation, Sarah. I loved listening to all of your ideas. It was so thorough and thoughtful. And yes, the county will never ask for free proposal work, so just be short of that. We would never do that. And I think it is a red flag. If you see any agency that's asking for that, it says a lot about, their knowledge of like standard kind of practice, but also their budgets, and like how able are they to put together a great project if they can't pay for the proposals. So yeah, look out for that, definitely. But I would agree. I think it'd be rare for an artist to accept an unpaid proposal. Like Sarah says, would have to be, that you're getting something else out of it, that is going to be supportive to you and your practice.
Thank you. This next one might be one for you, Sarah, but also Brianna, if you have ideas. But it was aside from callforentry.org, are there other good places to look for RFQ and RFP databases?
Gosh, that's
You
such a
know,
good
yeah, it
question.
is a good question. I'm not as familiar at the moment. I know a few years ago I used to kind of look out for these things more for artists, and I'm just a little bit behind. I'm sure things exist. I remember there was one called like
Yes.
publicartist.com or .org. I
Org.
don't know if
Yep.
it's still
Yep.
going, but that used to be decent. And then Arts for LA, they have kind of a mix of opportunities for, people working in the administration field as well as for artists. Um,
There's also
yeah.
Cafe. I know that's
Cafe,
one
yeah.
folks get a lot at. It has a lot of mixed bagged things, but it's gonna
Mhm.
capture a lot. Um, I would I would add a caution to be aware of ones that ask you to pay to play.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, one of the most effective things that you can do on your own rather than looking for places that list it is if you use Gmail or other kinds of Google things, you can set up a Google alert and give it keywords and tell it to say, look for the phrase public art RFQ RFP 2026. And you can say, send me an email daily, send me an email weekly, and you'll get an email with everything that it's finding in the Google sphere. Sorry, I sound like I don't know how computers work, but and actually give you that in a summary with links in your email. So in addition to these places where you can pull that already are pulling lists for folks, you can also kind of curate your own with these kind of uh, Google search scrapes that they'll do and send you emails about.
That's a more sophisticated route than I would have proposed, but I think also just good old-fashioned like mailing lists, make sure you're subscribed to LA County Arts,
Yep.
DCA, which is Department of Arts and Culture, and really like all of the agencies and funders around the communities that you'd like to work, whether that's
Yeah,
LA or further afield. And then good old-fashioned social media. If you can follow some of these agencies,
yeah,
they post things, and you probably already know that.
totally. Okay, follow-up question that's a little bit similar, but are there good entry-level opportunities? Many that this person is seeing are either large-scale projects likely for teams. What opportunities would be good for an individual? maybe starting out to build public art experience for their CV?
I think really the ones that often explicitly say for emerging artists, they're often temporary installations. And so, yeah, I see a lot of calls actually that are for like building wraps, or it's like on a specific fence at a site or bus stations, and it has like a kind of time period to it of several months. But I think those are like the most entry level for proof of concept, and to get good installation images. I think also looking at um, artists working in public space on their own, like Ana Mendieta, like stage your own, make your own work in public space first. And then when you do these RFQs, you don't look like someone who needs that permission to do that first. It just looks like it's in the flow of your career and your work and your practice. So I think even as an emerging artist, if you can build in um, public works into your practice at whatever scale feels right for you,
Mhm.
um, to work really locally and to put your work in public space and document it, I'd say like the first thing to do is to activate it yourself, and then it builds the portfolio, and then you can honestly enter most RFQs. And I think often in the long list, there's a kind of mix of career level. So they may have a few emerging artists, a few mid-career, and a few very established, like in that long list. So there is a chance for a big commission, even for someone early in their career, I would say.
I would add to that, that's all really, really good advice. I would add to that if you see opportunities that are advertised as like design only, that's kind of a good, first stepping point between maybe some work that you've done like at a fairly, professional scale, but you haven't, gone into public art yet. It's a kind of an easier first step because a lot of the heavy lifting around like, managing full material translation with art fabricators and installation is not put on the artist. So they're just looking for a design usually, and then they will work in-house or manage the subcontractors as an agency so the artist doesn't have to.
Oh, and I just thought of another way in is sometimes through a residency or a fellowship that gives you fabrication support. So there's a few, like there's the Kohler residency where you work with the Kohler facilities with iron casting. So you suddenly would have these capabilities to do large scale like iron work through that residency, or the Socrates Sculpture Park Fellowship is resources for an artist to come spend time in that park and to develop a sculpture for that park, and there's like a small budget. So like it's really interesting to see also the artists who have gone through that fellowship have often gone on to produce more public works.
Mhm.
So sometimes a residency or a fellowship that has a kind of support component to it and a public exhibition component to it, in outdoor public space. Those can be a really nice way in for an emerging artist, and but you still need that portfolio to get the residency. So I would say like first thing is to start building that on your own.
Yeah. Thank you both. Sometimes the location may be far away. Sometimes it may not even be built yet. So this question was, how do you recommend going about writing a letter of interest for a location that maybe you haven't or can't go to? I might try to research online, but do you have or look to see if I have some kind of interest or connection, but do you have any other tips?
I don't know. I don't have a lot of comfort in that area because I always feel like if I'm not accountable to that community and that place, I don't know if I should make a semi-permanent. So I have a lot of like
Mhm.
skepticism for myself. I tend to only apply to the ones where I'm like, this place like shaped my life. I want to give back to this place,
Yep.
which isn't to say like you shouldn't do it. I just don't have that experience of sort of like remote research. The site visit is like so important to me and like a relationship to it. I'm trying to think, there are a few though, like of legendary sites that you sort of know and have shaped you like from a distance. So there's
Mm.
like CERN, like to be in that lab, like thinking about atomic theory, like that has affected everyone. So that's like a remote one where you would have to picture yourself and you would just go on the website and just deeply, you're reading everything, you're reading all the papers, you're just really gathering everything you can. But I think even if you are remote, I would really I don't know, advise to still make sure you have a connection to that place if you're applying, because I think it's just that's how a strong proposal happens, is that compelling relationship. Um, and you don't have to be in a place to have a strong relationship to it, but yeah, I think somehow even virtually, like that place should be a place of importance to you.
Yeah, I think if it's not the exact physical location, it has to be a connection to like the community or the body of the work or the concept, that, informs your practice. There has to be some tie. Because otherwise I would agree. I don't think there's a lot of, there's just the time is precious. And if you don't have some sort of connective thread, it's probably not the right opportunity for you.
Great. Have you typically done community engagement after being accepted for a project or during the finalist stage, or is that something that usually happens only if you're selected?
Sometimes there's like the finalists come and do a public lecture,
Hmm.
almost like academic job talks. Sometimes for public artwork, the artist will come and give a public lecture, and then the public is brought into the proposal stage. And there are opportunities like that. And I think that's actually amazing because I think it's really amazing for community members to have that Q&A opportunity looking at the proposal. Or I've even had it where it's during the site visit, there's an artist talk. And I'm not against it, but I do think artists should be compensated if they're doing a workshop or a lecture along the way. But I do think it's a great way also for the community to ask questions of the artists, to tell them what's important to them, but also for the artists to ask questions. It's like a really nice research opportunity and also building relationships, expanding your friendship circle. It's like a really good opportunity for all of that. So I think public engagement can be great. It should be supported. It should be compensated, and it should feed your proposal and your research, ideally.
I think in that context too, you're talking about something that maybe the commissioning agency has discussed and set up. If that's not in place, I'm not saying you can't go and talk and meet and learn, but I would be very careful about how you present yourself to a community at that time, especially if you're still in competition. Because if you don't get the proposal and you've gone around and met a bunch of folks in the community and gotten them all on board, you might be setting up a difficult scenario. So I would say if you're talking about wanting to engage community prior to being selected during a proposal or competition phase, I'd check in with your commissioner about, they might have a real strong relationship with community and want to roll this out to that community in a specific way that they know would support the goals and means of the project and ultimately the artist that's selected. So I would just check in and make sure you're not maybe uh, accidentally kind of stepping in somewhere that might not be great to step into. When forming an idea for proposals, how do you partially switch off the artist mode and view the idea from a public's perspective?
I
don't
mean, I'm
know.
sure Sarah has a
It's
lot to
really
say about,
good.
but just listening to Sarah's presentation, I feel like I really liked the point you made about considering public arts as like public artworks as a multi-sensory experience. And so that might be one, initial avenue in is like thinking about the artwork, like how is somebody passing by or like a staff member or like regular user of the space going to encounter the work and how are they going to feel about it? Not just visually looking at it, but like how might you imagine that person like engaging with it, walking around it, walking through it, touching it, if that's permissible, like how is it going to affect like the physical environment around it, like viewpoints and shadows and light and, all these things. And so I think that might be one way to kind of start thinking about it. Because I imagine it would be hard when you care about something so much and you wanted an idea to be seen and experienced by people. It can be sometimes hard to think about like an employee at a site, like if it's their day, at their lunch break and they experience the work, is that going to be the same experience that you have of it as you've been working on it for months in your studio? Um,
Yeah, I think the artist hat is always on, but I don't want that to be misleading because I would say I am a member of the public and I really connect with people and also like the work everyone is doing. Like I identify and empathize with everyone who is like working a 10, 12-hour day and coming through. Like I'm like, I also feel that, like, all those things that, like, fatigue, frustrations about access, like, I feel like I want to always be making work from the position of, like, really being in my neighborhood, like, really talking to everyone and really connecting with, like, all the various communities I feel accountable to as an artist, so I don't think of myself as, like, very separate from the shared concerns, or at least that is the right commission for me if I feel like I really have a sense of the use of the space and also like our current conditions and how the city feels in this moment and connecting with struggle and rage and difficulty and like really feeling it as an artist in like a sense of deep connection. So I think the artist hat is always on, but I'm always connecting, I think, just with my sense of where I'm from and where I came from. And yeah, because I'm from the working class, so I always feel like it's incredible that I'm an artist because everyone I grew up with worked in the trades. And I just feel like I have this affinity still with materials and labor. And I want to get into all of that with everyone. I want to know what everyone's doing at work that day. I want to know what everyone ate. I want to know what everyone's feeling physically and what are the points of access that feel blocked. And I want to like push against that. So, something about being an artist, I feel like allows you to connect to labor and the material conditions of living really directly and really deeply. So hopefully you feel like in deep solidarity with everyone using the space. I don't know, that maybe it's kind of vague, but I feel like the artist hat is also sharing some things with the engineer hat and the fabricator and the architect and the city commissioner or like whoever may be there there's something about the way artists think that can kind of tap into all those different directions or be almost like an ambassador or a peacemaker or like a diplomat of some kind. So the artist hat should stay on, but the artist hat should be expansive and curious and caring in many ways. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. We've got a question here about does anyone on the panel know of any organizations or groups that focus specifically on supporting and educating and mentoring Black and Brown or Indigenous POC artists in the public art space, ideally in California?
I do know of one, and I'm the name is escaping me. If you give me a minute, I'm gonna try to
Yeah,
look for it.
take your time. And folks in the audience, if you do, feel free to add that too as well. I'll be honest, I don't know of a space that specifically supports, and I mean by an organization that is specifically, well, actually, that's not true. I would say a group that we're working with right now, LA Commons,
Hmm. Yeah.
is a nonprofit organization that specifically supports and works with people of color, Black, Brown, Indigenous folks to do a lot of smaller scale mural and temporary public artworks. They do a whole roster of things. So I would definitely check out LA Commons. And I will continue to think if others pop into my mind.
I really like this aggregator called Pick Up the Flow. It's
Mm,
pickuptheflow.org, and I see a lot of calls on there that are specific for BIPOC artists, for Indigenous artists, fellowships, RFQs. They definitely like populate that specific aggregator, so that might be helpful. Um, Also, specific residencies, I think, could be really helpful for building networks and community and like also getting that word of mouth. So some residencies I've heard really good things about. There's one called Whistle Space that's really magical that was organized by artist Will Rawls, that centers Black artists, and it's very multidisciplinary. So that's one to look at for building peer-to-peer connections to like find out some of those pathways to the RFQs and RFPs. Denniston Hill is another really amazing residency that I've heard good things about. So I'd say like also check out residencies too that are really BIPOC centered and Indigenous centered. Forge Projects is an Indigenous arts organization, nonprofit that has fellowships and commissions that's on the East Coast. I'm trying to think of others, but definitely check out Pick Up the Flow. That one's been really great.
I'm gonna put it in the chat. Mesley Projects. I think I'm saying that incorrectly, but they have a fellowship for Native and Indigenous artists that my friend was a part of, and she was doing some work for them, and it seems like a really cool organization.
fantastic. Thank you. All right. I'm just trying to see. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. We do have a few more questions. Maybe we can answer this one pretty quickly. If one of you wants to provide a succinct answer to what is the difference between an artist statement and an artist bio?
I think a bio can be more dry. It's sort of like one sentence about the spirit of the work, and then sometimes it just has exhibited here, 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 and here. A bio can be much shorter and can be sort of like a narrative CV, whereas an artist statement is what's important to you, what are you researching, what artists do you look to. It's sort of more in depth. look at your practice and what conceptually drives it, what the spirit of your work is. It's more information, and the bio's kind of just like a blurb. It's like shorthand, in my opinion. Yeah.
I would totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, agree.
Another one that maybe could be fairly quick to answer, but I know there's a broad range of answers to this, but are there any specific software tools that you really recommend artists invest some time in for creating great looking proposals?
I think you should use whatever software feels creative for you, like what feels like a playful space for you. Um, I really don't like how a lot of the dominant softwares are like proprietary things you have to pay for. So I don't know, there's not many workarounds sometimes to the Adobe suite, like Photoshop is Photoshop, but I don't support it. I want there to be an open source version. But for 3D modeling, there's like many open source free options there to check out. I mean, Google SketchUp is one of them, but like there's many free versions in the 3D realm for whatever reason. But I, I think it really depends on the artist, but I just caution against things that are proprietary and expensive. But whatever feels playful to you. Yeah.
I would add to that that like there's no one way to do a proposal for sure. I mean, there's certainly things you're going to see that you need to address and follow if you're, following something. But as much as using the right software, I think if you have the time and the capacity and the network to share your proposal with some trusted peers, that can be one of the best ways to help you refine and make sure you're really putting a best foot forward, because we are not always the best at being our own critics and our own judges, especially when you're really close to something. So I just always advocate as well to use the free resource of a friend or a peer to review and give you feedback if you have the capacity to have that kind of time for review and time and connections that are generous and open to do that. Okay, we are right at time, and we do still have a couple of questions, but I think we have covered the spirit and intent of most of these. And if we will take a look at what didn't get covered, and if there are any other questions that we feel need a follow up, for those of you who've asked them in the chat, we will make sure to follow up with those. You are also, if we can go to the next slide, please, Summer. If we didn't cover your question and you feel like you have more you would like to ask, you can always email us. Our email is info@dysonwomack.com. If you have feedback, comments, additional questions, we are absolutely open to hearing from folks. So please feel free to use that. If you want to learn more about the upcoming workshops or also see some open calls that we run, please follow us at Dyson Womack on Instagram. I just want to close tonight by again saying a huge thank you to Sarah for joining us, for walking us through this in a way that just was like the blanket that I needed tonight. And for really being so generous with your insights, your experience, and your thoughtfulness around this. So thank you so much. I also want to say thank you to LA County Arts and Culture and Brianna, as always, for being the impetus for this amazing program, and for trusting us as partners to work with you on building this program of workshops. And I would be remiss if I did not say thank you as well to Summer, who always is here to make sure things run smoothly, go smoothly. And then finally to the audience, thank you folks for taking time out of your evening to participate and come and learn and talk and chat. So with that, we will leave it there. And we will see you guys, whoever can, on Wednesday night for the next installment in the workshop series. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone. Good luck.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.